This is Eating Crow with Pete Durand.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Eating Crow podcast. It's a shame, everybody. We should have recorded the last 15 minutes of Kate and I shooting the shit and getting to know each other because we've been waiting for this.
Yeah, please meet my new best friend, Pete.
It has been, like, literally we had all this pent-up questions for each other, like, tell me why this is, and then we explained it.
Yeah, who are you?
This might be the most...
Isn't that the coolest thing, though?
It is.
Like, sorry to interrupt you, but, like, I love how, there's people who... So all I've known about you is, like, your who you are online, obviously, but I've seen your photo, your headshot that's half an inch high, right? So that's the Pete I know.
That's how my wife sees me.
Right.
Give me a little guy.
And I've been I've been looking into the eyes of that person for so long, and I feel that I know that person. And so isn't it remarkable how, like, suddenly, even though on the screen, obviously it's not the case, but we go from that two-dimensional thing to this is two-dimensional also, more or less. But I feel like can I swear on your show? I fucking know you. Like, I'm dying to go have a beer and watch a game with you and your wife.
We need to do that. And by the way, next time I get to New York, or next time you actually make your way anywhere south, we're going to find a way to meet.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I think, this thing we're talking about, by the way, doesn't come natural to everyone. Like, we have the ability to reach through the screen or the headshot and make a friend, make a connection.
Well, and
it's a hard thing.
You've been doing this all your life, really, when you started on radio, which didn't have the visual, right? So it's all about the voice.
Thank God.
You've got such a great voice for radio. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. When I was in radio, Pete, like, they didn't have any headshots. Like, the web hadn't really arrived yet. I remember when it did, we all had to put them on. It was kind of a stress, and we had to write bios. And, like, I remember... I'll try to remember mine, but it had something to do with, like, I like chocolate, raspberries, and I think I said I had a huge crush on Ryan Adams.
Okay.
Right, which I didn't, but I thought it would be interesting enough. Yeah. And because, he's so weird, and he would, like, get drunk and pee his pants on stage, and you never knew what was going to come out of that guy.
So, I like to kick a show off with at least three things: chocolate, raspberries, and public urination.
There you go. Check.
You set the stage. It can only go really crazy places from here. So, people that know me recognize this is, by the way, why my wife would like to meet you, because she's going to go, there's actually someone out there that likes you. I definitely need to meet her. She doesn't believe any of this is real.
Yes.
Because you're making up this whole podcast thing. No one would. You're paying these people to talk to you. That's what she's convinced.
That's so funny.
She goes, I don't even want to talk to you, and I have to. So, it's amazing. All right, so I want to talk about, by the way, you've got this great company, Lately AI. We can talk about that towards the end, but I want to find out how you got there, right? So you were in radio for a long time, and it's funny, you just told me you launched a radio station in Wilmington, North Carolina, which is right down the road.
Yeah, it is called The Penguin, which is very hard to say, The Penguin, because you pop the P's, and then you're swallowing the N and the G, right? And try to say it sexy, and I'll try it for you now. It's like, you're listening to The Penguin.
It's actually pretty good.
But it's ridiculous, though, right? I mean, come on.
In a town whose college mascot is the Seahawk, somehow there's a radio station with The Penguin?
Yeah, it was a couple of guys who came from Asheville, actually. So they had worked at that really cool public radio station there, and they started... The format that I was in is called AAA, which doesn't mean baseball, but it was named by a guy who was a baseball fan. It means Adult Album Alternative.
Oh, okay.
So, like, this format in the 70s and 80s broke groups like the Police and the Talking Heads, and you'd hear Bowie, but of course Ryan Adams and Alabama Shakes,
the Alabama Shakes
everything
are awesome.
from B.B. King to, I was in the 90s, so there's like a lot of Sarah McLachlan, for example, stuff like that.
A lot of angst.
And a lot of angst, not enough. I mean, so it didn't go all the way to Nirvana, right? But we could throw, perhaps I mean, I'm trying to think of something that's so not 90s. Like 311 just came to my mind. I was telling somebody, by the way, that record they had, I think it was the second one. And I don't love 311 by any remote thing, but I owned this album and I used to vacuum to it. It was my vacuuming music.
Everyone has a vacuuming soundtrack, by the way. They don't want to admit
Do they?
it. Yeah. I'm going to tell you right now, mine's Hall & Oates. I'm going to admit it right now. It's Hall & Oates. It's a guilty pleasure. By the way,
which I'm just trying to. Are you man-eater on the vacuum? Is that you?
100%. And by the way, just to break myself of the habit, we bought a house with all hardwood floors. I can't vacuum anymore.
Oh, great!
I literally had to walk away from it. I had to put it away. If it comes on right now, I got to go into a corner and cry myself to sleep.
Do you remember, like, our I don't know why I would ask you if you remember this, but our family dog used to bark at the vacuum cleaner because it was convinced it was some kind of animal.
So our dog, who is a Morkie, only howls. Mm-hmm. He's only done this one now with Little Big Town on the pontoon. The first time he did it, I was home by myself with him, and the dog starts to sing the chorus. Oh my
God.
I got it on film. I will send it to you. It is the most hilarious. He doesn't say anything. When that song comes on, only that one artist, only that one title, without fail, he will go crazy.
It's incredible. You got to TikTok that.
He's heavily, by the way, we should. He's heavily medicated now. We're talking over each other because we just have so much to share.
And I'm so rude. I mean, you're the host, so I should shut up. But I was just going to say, like, you've made it when your thing becomes a verb. So I just said you should TikTok that, right? And so, like, I've thought about this. When will someone say, like, I'm going to lately... honestly, it doesn't roll off the tongue that way. So I think they never will. And we should have thought of that. Like when you're
too many L's.
Note to self, folks, when you're naming your company. Yeah, when you're naming your company in your future, you have to imagine how it will sound if it becomes a verb. Right?
Well, you should actually get to the point where someone says, "I'm going to Chernis this." That's what you got to go for.
So that I stole. I mean, that's not mine because it's my husband's.
Or I'm going to put it in the Chernis.
Put it in the Chernis. He so I had told you Chernis rhymes with furnace because my husband, of course, is a musician. Their band, the Damwells, was our favorite record of the year. The first year I was the music director at the Loft XM50 on XM satellite radio. And of course, job hazard because I fell in love with musicians all the time and they're all assholes except this one.
Sure.
Really nice man. But he's an incredible guitar player. In fact, Eric Ambel, who was Joan Jett's guitar player, used to call my David the best guitar player in New York. Wow. And so his nickname was Chernis the Furnace because he's a smaller person. He's about 5'4", but he packs a fiery punch, you might say.
That is so awesome. So I interviewed a guy named Dale Dupree the other day on my podcast. Do you know who Dale is? He started the Sales Rebellion. Mm-mm. And Dale was in a metal band. A speed metal band for like 7 years when he was 15 to like his early 20s. And he met his wife at a show. She was in the audience. He looked at her and he goes, I knew right then and there. So, despite the rumors about the music industry being so difficult, there are chances for romance in music. There
are, and also entrepreneurship, I think, to your point as well.
Yes.
Because I know a lot of people that have come out of the music industry. And here's why, I think. I was a line cook all through middle school and high school and college, Pete. Everything Tony Bourdain has ever said is 100% true. I've totally lived it. And then radio, and then now startup land, and what they all have in common is the lawlessness of it all, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that, radio breeds that.
The lawlessness was interesting. He said, I experienced things that I never thought I'd experience at a very young age, by the way, which means he had to kind of figure out which path he wanted to take. He said, I got to meet we opened for one of my favorite bands of all time. And they're all 10 or 15 years older than we are. Oh, I can't think.
Who is the favorite band?
All right, let me see.
Okay, we'll have to put a pin on that and you put it in the show notes.
I won't
know who they are because I'm not a speed metal fan. But
same here. I didn't recognize them. But by the way, I'm going to look them up too. But he said, I looked at these guys and I'm like, that's going to be me in 15 years. He goes, unless I choose a different path, which for some is the right thing to do, some's not the right thing to do. The Damwells, that album was the album of the year on your station at Sirius, and you got to meet the guitar player, and that's where it all went from there?
Yeah, so his band, that was which record was that? It's called Bastards of the Beat, I think. Okay. And they're kind of like, Tom Petty-ish, you might say.
Okay.
I think better, of course. There's a little movie about them that won a bunch of awards because Epic Records, what they used to do, I don't know if they do this anymore because I'm out of the music industry, but they invest in several bands at once and they pit them against each other. So the bands were the Damwells, Augustana, and the Fray.
Oh my goodness.
And we all know who won.
Yeah.
The Fray, right? And so the movie is about kind of that and what happens to the band. It implodes. And David was in a really angry place the year that was being filmed. And I think he has just really one line because he refuses to talk. And he's playing, they're in the recording studio playing. And the guitar he's holding is glittery pink. And the camera shoots to him and he looks at the camera and he says, "This is not my guitar."
That's his whole line.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you guys met back, what?
But anyway, so now he has...
2006 was this?
6.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was 2006. And since then, he's cut his hair and wears chinos and he's in sales.
Oh my gosh, he's become his father.
To your point. Yeah, he's very good at it, though, which is... I take notes from him because he works downstairs and I hear him all the time. And I've heard the people he works for too, the good ones and the bad ones. And like he worked for this horrible CEO, this bitch, for a long time. And every time I would sort of eavesdrop and think to myself, God, don't be her. Don't be her.
By the way, some of those are the best lessons. The bad examples are the best lessons.
Yeah. I mean, for sure, I am not always awesome, as Lauren and Chris and Jason and Brian and my whole team will tell you. And the terrible thing is I know it when it's happening, Pete.
Yeah.
And I know when I'm taking the funny out of the room, right? And I know when I'm being soul crushing and I can't help it as it's happening because I'm just human and I'm frustrated and the weight is on me and the weight is real. And we've been eating glass for a long time because we're a startup and it's hard. Mm-hmm. And it's my old boss who I hated had this terrible phrase, which I hated, and I'm going to use it, but it was shit rolls downhill. And when I see myself doing that, I'm like, fuck, you can't be this kind of leader. This is not a leader, And I was just kind of complaining on LinkedIn yesterday, actually, that, you were telling me what an incredible, I hate to say superhuman because I feel like it undercuts her, but an incredible superhuman your wife is and all the work she was doing with the logistics of running your life and the life of the family.
Right.
And while I don't have kids and I can't relate to that, the logistics of running a startup, it's not just that's actually the easy part, believe it or not. The hard part is all the expectations that are upon you, especially if you're an underdog, right? Because the comparisons and the levels of success, they often move. Which is annoying to me because I'm competitive. We talked about that as well.
Yep.
And before we hit record, and I'm never interested in winning the game, Pete. I'm interested in beating the fucking machine to death, right?
Yeah, I got it.
I have a couple of arcade games out in our garage, and like real bona fide arcade games, and I've rolled the numbers over 3 or 4 times on each one. That's beating the machine.
I have to know which games they are. So
it's Galaga, Haunted House, Pac-Man, and Centipede.
Okay, I see the Pac-Man poster behind you.
Yeah, here we go. That's actual velvet, like velour. Remember those?
Oh, yes.
And it's 3-dimensional. My dad owned the largest print retailer in the Northeast in the 80s. So he sold posters to everybody in the mall.
Well, in the
so
80s,
I would go down to the arcade.
That was a big business in the 80s.
It was. And I learned a lot from my dad. I mean, he was a really good entrepreneur and figured out how to, my dad is really good at math and I'm not very good at math, but the key to his success is to figure out how to use every part of every scrap of every thing That's number one. And the second thing is to, I hate to say it, self-included, but people are dumb and we make mistakes and we break things, or we do it all the time. So my dad came up with all these ways to correct other people's errors. If somebody accidentally ruined someone else's artwork, he could fix anything. Really anything. And it's amazing to me. So he has the ability to foresee the chances of the mistakes happening and have a fallback for that, right?
Wow. So when you look at your transition from the radio, and I think one of the stories behind Lately AI is the intuition and the knowledge you learned about people, right? And you shifted very quickly into this marketing consultant and did that for years. So how did you take everything you learned in radio, which, by the way, is an advertising-driven business, right? You have to reach audiences. But what was the thesis? If you're walking in to meet a new marketing consultant client, I'm Kate. I've been on the radio for 10 years. I know my shit. What was the pitch? Tell me the pitch.
Yeah. Well, so the one thing I figured out in radio, there's no money in radio. I was at XM broadcasting to 20 million listeners a day. I made it to the show. There was only 2 positions up above mine. And this is in 2006, and I made $55,000 a year in Washington, D.C., big market, which is not a lot of money. I remember my dad actually saying to me, there's not really any room to grow here. FYI, are you considering this? Because I hadn't. All I just thought was this is such a cool job. I'm having the time of my life. But what I did figure out was that if you're the production director, you can, which means the engineering and the putting together of the commercials, so the writing, the creating, the voiceovers, you can make a lot of side money doing that and charge quite a lot. So I could charge, $150 to $200 an hour for just my voice. Right. And I wasn't very good at that. I can't do characters or any of that kind of stuff. I have one voice. I did it for you. It's kind of dreamy, sexy.
Dreamy, sexy, right. But you can shift into that anytime you need
sexy.
to.
I can also do I worked for, so no one ever asked me about this, but I used to work for a ski reporting company, a national ski reporting company. We would get up at 3:30 in the morning, and the Associated Press would spit out a snow report for everywhere in the country. Obviously, we'd pretend that we were on the slopes, and we record these live 60-second snow reports pulling from the weather, and then we would have the website open so we could see what the trails were and kind of anything we could find out about where it snowed in the trails. So it'd be, and you would have to curate your voice for the kind of radio station it was. Sure. So whether it was alternative or country or news or whatever, right? And so I was good at the young alternative stations because I could be if you're not out in the pow-pow today, you're missing out. Time to shush down, pink shushy cat. Woo! Whatever, just the stupid thing.
That's awesome. So if you were doing this for the radio station in West Virginia, you'd be y'all, it's snowing out here pretty good. You got to get out and get some white powder. Maybe even ski some or snort some too, whatever you prefer. I love that. Know your audience.
Yeah. Know your audience. Yeah. So that's the aspect, though, that I learned you could make money with. And so because I learned that, I wrote hundreds and hundreds of commercials. And I was also a fiction writing major, Pete. So another lawless endeavor, right? Because in fiction, you can make up your own rules, which I did. And I love the sound of words. I love the way words read. And so that aural wonder was reinforced by radio, because in radio, it's the theater of the mind, and the parallel between reading and just listening is very similar because both of them require the human to play a role with your imagination. They require effort, right? So in video, you're just sitting back having it all done for you. But when you read a book or you are listening to a podcast or anything really,
or an audiobook for that matter,
your brain has to fill the blank. Yeah, exactly. Right. Which is, by the way, I always hate it when authors read their own work because they're generally terrible at it, and they don't allow for the theater of the mind because they're so focused on kind of feeding you. They're too close to it, so they're trying to spoon feed you the story.
Yeah. It's interesting.
And not let you fill in the blank and take it.
I have two examples that resonate with what you just said. So obviously I have 3 kids, right? My daughter and my oldest daughter, my daughter loves Harry Potter. When she was a kid, it was kind of her thing, right? My youngest son liked it. My middle son wanted nothing to do with it. But so I read all the books with my daughter and with my son, and then when the movies came out, we literally walked out of the theater, and what's amazing is we said the same thing. Like that is exactly how I imagined it. Like they took the book and what you were imagining on every character, what they were wearing, how they talked, how they walked, what the hallways looked like, what the paintings did, and they made it come to life. You're like, literally, that's the best adaptation of a book to a screenplay I've ever seen. It shocked me how well it was done. And we just drove back from a wedding in Charleston, and we listened to Matthew McConaughey's book, Greenlight. And you were talking about how you don't like it when authors read their own books. It was interesting listening to him read this book because the opening...
Because he's an actor.
He's an actor. And the opening scene, he takes a clip from some section of the book, and that's the opening scene he starts with. And I looked at my wife. We're 5 minutes, and I'm like, holy shit. We got to finish this. And you're right. As an actor...
Keep driving.
we drove around. We got home and drove around the subdivision an hour to finish the damn book. But he made it real. Like you could picture...
Because he knows.
Yeah. You could picture... Yeah. The sound of words, the way they read, you were drawn in on the way he had a really good pause at the end. He's like, green light. Like that was kind of that's why I told you this story, green light. And he would just go on to the next one.
It's everything, the delivery. People have said for a long time, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Mm-hmm. And that's true. And, I grew up, there was a book award called the Caldecott Award for children's books. I don't know if that still happens, but those children's books would have like this big gold sticker on it. And my mom was a first grade teacher, so she always bought these for us. And they were hardcover children's stories. And they were all great. And they came with records. They came with readings. Oh. And so it was like Bernadette Peters, these great classic voices. And I grew up just playing with my dollhouse, believe it or not, and listening to these records, Where the Wild Things Are, and Free to Be You and Me, like, all that stuff. And there's something about, I love being told a story, Pete. I love it. I reread the Harry Potter series every summer because I love the story. I love all the recalls, the callbacks that are throughout. Yeah. I love the puzzle and how so often I see the different setups and they surprise me. I see a new setup that she engineered like back in book 1. Yeah. Like, Jesus, that's just a lot of thinking that had to go on here. And the great thing about an author like that, or a reader like Matthew, or a radio host, I believe, is when you're able to create that environment where the listener feels as though they're just going along for the ride, but they're actually taking ownership in the conversation with you. Mm-hmm. And the memory that I'm sharing with you around this, like, it's so deep and ingrained because the power of sound requires me, a human, right? And this is something, let's just tie it to Lately, that we talk about all the time. So at Lately, we use artificial intelligence to learn your brand voice and then transform a podcast like this into dozens of social posts. The AI learns what to clip up because it's listening to the words and phrases you and I say, and it's matching those ideas against what it knows your audience is most likely to like and comment and share online. Okay, that's what happens. Now, then that's amazing. The hard part is we refuse to let the AI do all the work for you because we know that if the human intervenes, the difference is 1 + 1 = 3,000, right? If it's just the robot doing it on its own, it's just automation. But when you have the human in there, this is the rush of nostalgia when there's a powerful story like Harry Potter or green light. That's the thing that makes fans. We're fans. We're talking about this now. We can't help it.
Yeah.
And the power of a fan is the long tail. It's you can't put a price on it. It goes on forever and ever and ever.
Oh, man. The power of the fan is the long tail. That might be the title of this episode.
Like radio.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's, I remember when that came out, this is my format. Adult album alternative lives on the long tail because we're not pop. We're not country. It's always a format that's like number 20 or 21 in the market. And I'm going to tie this back. So when I was in North Carolina at that radio station, I had gone to XM and my program director called me and he was like, "Hey, the Arbitron book came out. You're number 1." And I was like, "What? This is impossible. Number 1 in a format that's always 2021. And I was evenings. Evenings are never number 1. Drive times are number 1, right? In North Carolina, I beat out country and rock and roll, classic rock and roll. And he was like, "How did you do that?" Well, I was the production director, so all the drops were mine. All the commercials were written by me or engineered by me, more or less. And when I was on the air, it's my show, so it's my voice in between, and also it's my music choice. And I had tossed his playlist out the window because it didn't do what we're talking about now. It didn't weave the new songs in with the old songs so that the listener had a point of nostalgic familiarity with which to go along the ride.
Right? It's interesting. There is a radio station here in Raleigh that launched a few years ago, and it's WBBB 96.1, and that's exactly the format they've chosen. So they play a little bit of everything. They don't play country, but they play, I wouldn't necessarily say alternative, but they play pop rock from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 2000s, and they weave the new artists in with the old stuff. So you're listening to it, and we talked about this before, right? I might have some Pink, but then all of a sudden I'm listening to Hall & Oates. And I will pull my collar over, get outside of the street, and jam on some Hall & Oates.
You're like, all right.
But you're like, you can't get that anywhere else. You just can't. If you want to just be brainless and turn the radio on and listen to it for a while and have somebody else take you for the ride like you did as a DJ, that's refreshing versus you having great. When I watch my kids with Spotify, I'm exhausted. How they curate their own music and create their own stations, and they love it. I was a Pandora guy because I just picked an artist and hit play, and then it just did it for me. So
it is exhausting. Yeah, I never do that anymore. Like, we'll go somewhere and someone will be like, "Kate, click the music," and I'm like, I don't fucking work there anymore. That's not my job anymore. It's too exhausting.
It is. Sometimes you just want to be in the moment. So,
Yeah.
I'm curious. You mentioned earlier that the startup thing is hard, right? And you've got this mixture of artificial intelligence, but you've got people still engaged with it. I'm going to try to parrot back what you said. The AI is interesting. I think that allows you eventually scale, right? Because that automation piece is helpful, but you have to bring the humans into it to bridge that gap. And I think you said that the theater of the mind, right? I think is that where you're connecting that automation back into the theater of the mind?
Yeah. So, and I'll do two things. Let me give everybody a proof point and then explain it. So,
sure.
At Lately, we have a 98% sales conversion. 98%. And we only use Lately to market Lately. Nothing else. So okay. I do 3 or 4 interviews a week, just like this. I'm going to ask you for the file, or Emma is, my coworker.
Okay.
And we're going to take the file. We're going to run it through our own AI. It's going to transcribe this podcast and read through it and find the ideas and phrases and quotes that it already knows are going to resonate with my target customer.
Okay.
And it'll clip the video up. And then my human, Alex, will go through and just make sure the AI is on par, because sometimes it will pull weird things out, like a non sequitur, and you have to guide it because it's only a robot, right? It does learn. Right. And then she'll say, take 20 or 30 posts, publish them on our brand channels and also our employee channels, because we're stronger together. Mm-hmm. And then we watch to see who likes and comments and shares. And we consider them, warm leads, basically, and push them into the funnel that way. So that's the proof. The why it works, to touch on your point, is like this. So when your brain listens to a new song, Pete, it must instantly access every other song you've ever heard in an instant. This is how the neuroscience of music listening works. So imagine that, right? That your brain is running through everything, this massive library of songs. Sure. And it's looking for familiar touch points, so it knows where to index the new song in the library of the memory of your brain. Now, by accident, by default, by nature, nostalgia, memory, emotion, all these things get touched as this is happening, which is why music is so powerful. Those are also the characteristics that must be in play for trust to happen. And trust is why we buy. So now when you write copy, whether it's social media posts or an email or a text to your wife or a billboard sign, the person who reads that copy hears your voice in their head. And your voice, Pete, just like mine and everyone else's, is a song. There's a musical note. All sound has a frequency, right? Mm-hmm. So it's your job as the host of this podcast or the author of that text to give me familiar touch points and trigger nostalgia, memory, emotion, trust.
Wow. So I could be wrong. I've never heard anyone, first of all, I think this is due to your background, right? I've never heard anyone come with, 20 years of music in their background and think about everything that music does. And another easy example is my wife made it a policy that we would have music playing in our house every night. So like from 5 o'clock through dinner, it was Tony Bennett, Frank Sinatra, Michael Bublé, Harry Connick Jr., all the classics. Regardless of what my kids listened to during the day, it was a calming music. My kids could do homework to it. So now they associate that music to smells, right? Certain foods that she'd make, to nothing but pleasant memories of the family being together. That is her thing, and she's religious about it. If I'm cranking, Slightly Stupid, and she comes in at 5 o'clock, she's on Sonos, she switches the station, she looks at me, and I just go, okay. And all of my kids, she's the best. We're all music. We love music. None of us can play or sing, but we are musicaholics. We have all of the family plans. We share playlists. We fight with each other on who can run Sonos channels and stations and who can take over as DJ. My youngest son's kind of the champion there. But we just love every aspect of it. So I hadn't thought about the fact that music can trigger trust. So let's drill more into that. When you're taking a snippet from a podcast or a video or something else and you bring it to copy, what are the things that you've taught the AI and your people to look for that establish trust?
So for us, what I did was I created a couple dozen rules.
Yeah.
And we call them, my team calls me Kately, Pete. Kately from Lately.
I like that. I can use that.
Okay. So they're called Kately's Writing Rules. The subtitle that Chris, my employee, my teammate, created was the copywriting rules you wish you had in college. And I'll give you an example. So one of my favorite rules is don't use words that undercut your authority, that are weak, like probably, maybe, I think, I just wanted to.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
When you do that, you kill. A statement is powerful, and when you take a statement and you make it a guess, it's not that you have to be a know-it-all, but in writing, it just translates as you don't know what you're talking about, right? And our entire goal as sales and marketing people is to get people to do what we want them to do. Yep. No shame in that. That's communications, right? And so if I want you to do something for me, and I'm going to be a wimp on how I ask you to do it, it's not very compelling, of course. So once the AI runs through and does its thing, my team takes those rules, and that's the rules to augment. Now, we teach these rules to all of our customers live about once a month. I do these copywriting courses for companies like HubSpot, Content Marketing World, whomever. Sure. They're really fun because, I'm a rule breaker. So
you like to create the rules and then break them.
Of course. Then the AI So it uses you as the first example of things to learn from, but then it uses me and my team and all the data sets we have from all of our customers from the last 7 years who are doing these same kind of rules or augmentations, for example. One of the great learnings, to just double down on your point a little bit, that we found was, so Lately's AI services word clouds that literally show you the words people are responding to. And it does this with hashtags as well. So we don't really care what's trending in the world, because what really matters is what's trending with my target audience, right? And I can see it in black and white. Now, the traditional way in marketing to use hashtags is as an indexer. So you string a bunch of hashtags that you want your stuff to be searchable by. Now that has gone by the wayside because it's perceived as lazy and spammy, because it is. People will be like, hashtag Beyonce when they're talking about socks. Yeah. Come on. The SEO cottons onto this now. The algorithms do. But instead, if you use hashtags to augment what your message says and contextualize it further, or ground it, or add a sense of humor, then your engagement skyrockets. So for example, my highest performing hashtag, my personal one, is hashtag peeing my pants. Back to urination.
I knew we come full circle. We did.
That's what Gary Vaynerchuk, when Gary Vaynerchuk tweeted about us, that's what I said.
Well, right. That's, by the way, if Gary tweets at you and you come back with that, that's just epic. By the way,
it's hard to beat that.
I've seen you do this, right? So I see your posts, I see your hashtags, and there's something clever there. There's something that's pulling a point out of what you just of the copy to say, hey, look, if you're going to remember anything, remember this, right? And it might just be a humorous way to remember it, but honestly, that's why I reached out to you, because your copy was always humorous. But I'd look at your hashtags and go, shit, this girl's got a freaking wicked sense of humor. I don't know if anybody else picked up on this, but that shit's funny, right? So I'm like, and by the way, she just doesn't care. She's just throwing it out there. Like, this is who she is. Get on the train or not. So I love that stuff. It's authentic. But I hadn't considered
Thank you.
I hadn't considered the fact that hashtags in general are kind of stale unless you rethink them.
Yeah. So the AI learns from this, by the way. So we've done an experiment where we worked with Anheuser-Busch and Bev, and we wanted to see if the AI could start inputting that kind of voice into the text it pulled. Okay. So it would take it and then augment it itself. And the answer is yes. So we did it with them first, and like 10,000 pieces of content from one of their brands. They've got like 40 beer brands.
Okay.
And so it was able to study social media posts and radio scripts and anything that had like text with the brand voice in it. So then the second experiment was, let's do it with me, because I have thousands of pieces of content, tens of thousands. And so it was, I think it was with some Christmas copy. And it was so funny because I had been making some weird Santa analogies. I don't remember what it was like, but the AI started putting those kinds of hashtags into the copy.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's the next version, by the way, is my team is implementing it as we speak.
Would they do it? Is the goal to do the hashtags inline, or is it to do it at the end of the post? Inline.
Yeah.
Okay.
To inline, you can do them both ways. But what's nice about inline is there's a break because it's visual. A hashtag is a weird thing to see in the middle of a sentence. Also, it turns it blue. And writing is just like eating. I had told you that I was a line cook all through middle school and high school and college because I couldn't afford to feed myself, and I was a beast. I was climbing all the time and playing soccer, and I got 2 free meals a day behind the line, and I didn't have to look very nice because I'm not great on the wait staff side, and I could hang with the guys and I could smoke because you did back then. On the line, that was like a badge of honor. Can you smoke and like whip it up at the same time? The
I had
yes,
so many visuals from the cafeterias I was in back in the 80s and right now, just seeing that. You want extra fries with that? Yeah.
Exactly. Just like that, man. It's so disgusting. But yeah, so why was I telling you this story? Oh, so about how it looks in the plate. You guys have all seen Chopped. Like, that's one of the 3 categories is how it looks, how it appears. And writing is the same way. So, we think about, or earlier when we were talking, we started this conversation out. We're at a high. You and I were like jamming off each other. We're laughing. I'm pretty sure we're not even talking in a linear sense. So maybe people are having a hard time cotton on. And then we started talking about something else, and I purposely slowed it down. And I left some space in what we were talking about, because I want to make sure that I'm making people lean in at some point.
Right.
And give them a break, like a song.
That pause is really important, not only in public speaking, but also how you write. Right? Let people chew on that. In the copy, like you said, visually, it's a space. It's the way you list things. It's bringing them to a certain crescendo that you want them to by building up anticipation. Yeah.
That's right. And I'm thinking, I'm always reading it out loud before I hit publish. This is the big cheat. So I... Amazingly, as we were setting up this call, my microphone wasn't working. The irony of me being a tech entrepreneur and B, a former rock and roll DJ, and not having a mic that's working is annoying, but there it is. But the other thing is, Pete, so I use voice activated software. I don't type at all. I talk to my computer all day long because I have a partial permanent disability and I can't type without extreme pain.
Oh. Wow.
So I always hear myself. I always hear it before it goes out. So I know right away when I sound like a fucking asshole. Sometimes I hit send anyways.
So how is it is it capture you pretty well? I mean, does it learn how to pick up Kate-isms? I mean, or are you finding like, oh shit, I gotta fix that, I gotta fix that, or it's got it right?
It takes a long time. I've been using this since about 2007 or 8, and 2006 was when I left XM. That's why I left XM. And you train it like a language. So I use Dragon Naturally Speaking professionally, which is like the version for total hands-free usage. Okay. And it learns. So what's so interesting about this is, so the people who create Dragon are constantly feeding it language, whatever language you want. And they're feeding it current events, newspapers and all this stuff.
Sure.
So a couple things. Once in a while, this cracks me up so hard. I'll say, instead of yada, 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 I might say blah, blah, blah. And Dragon will type Bob, blah, blah, like from Arrested Development.
Oh my gosh. Because that's where it got it. That's hilarious.
I know. That's where it got it, yeah. And then my favorite one, Dragon, is, my team knows too, because like I'm lazy and I don't correct it. And so I don't make grammatical errors. I make sound-alike errors. So if you read the text, you could tell what I'm really trying to say. So, for example, it has multiple times confused the word VCs with feces.
Oh, perfect. But by the way, I've met a lot of VCs. Most of them are really good people, but I have a couple that I would call, yeah, and they know who they are.
Yeah, me too. But yeah, so it's
they know who they are.
It makes it interesting.
To the point where I guarantee you they're not listening to this podcast.
Some of them don't. I have to tell you, it's really this is for another show, but I've got some great stories, Pete, and the book is going to be. I'm going to title that chapter "Feces."
Please do. This reminds me of the joy my kids get when my mother talks to text.
Oh yeah, I bet.
It's epic. Literally epic.
Who knows what it's really saying?
You get your phone. It's like 65-inch paragraphs of just.
She lets it rip.
Oh yeah, and now she's discovered emojis. So she talks and requests emojis, which is great. Smiley face, poop, angry face, whatever. You're like, God. She needs.
It is amazing.
She needs some Kate in her life. That's all right. I gotta switch over to Dragon Naturally Speaking Professional. All right, yeah. So you and I could do.
Isn't that funny though? By the way, like that I still talk for a living, Pete. What's the irony there, huh?
So I'm curious. Has this software continued to? Obviously, they're populating with new information all the time. I'm guessing that they update the algorithms and you get new versions of it because if you've been using this for 14 years, that's come a long way.
They do, but I know some secrets at this point because I'm really good at it. So I know a lot of people who were the original builders who have moved on and done different things. So when there's a problem with Dragon, it's hard to fix, honestly, and unless you know where to go. And I know the who's, and I know the message boards and who to call. And they're weird people, totally weird, frankly.
Brain's working at a different level, that's for sure.
When COVID happened, the people who do build Dragon, their whole engineering team was in somewhere in South Asia. Anyways, they split because they all were working in the same room, and for some reason couldn't figure out how to work remotely. And so the fix crippled me for like 6 or 7 months, and suddenly I couldn't access my email, all this stuff. And so I had to call one of these guys and they built a workaround for me.
Oh my goodness.
Which is a pain in my ass for months until it was about a year, about 15 months until the new, version went up. And I don't know what other people did, but this is what you do. I mean, I don't think about this ever because this is my life and this is how I operate my day. But to other people, I mean, imagine you cannot type. You can't touch your phone or type.
Most people would freak out. They would freak out. They wouldn't know what to do.
And then I fixed it.
Wow. Yeah. So you're kind of living in this AI world every day, right? From you inputting things into your systems and recognizing it and then spitting stuff out. I'm like, this is a clip we should share with people based on this research and their audience and the person speaking, et cetera. So for people who've heard this and are now curious, who's the ideal customer for Lately AI? If they're listening, it's going, I should contact Kate and the team. What would they look like? Who would be the ideal client profile for you?
On the smaller side, people who have podcasts or it works with blogs and newsletters as well. So if you have long form content that you want to unlock the true power of, essentially, and save yourself eons of time, then you're my people. But then we work with enterprise customers as well. So Lately has a syndication capability, Pete, where one person can syndicate what the AI creates out to any employee Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram channel.
No kidding.
Like employee advocacy on steroids.
So if you think about having a really clever group of customer-facing folks who have a LinkedIn profile, if they now have the ability to scale this across their content, it's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I built a spreadsheet system. You had asked about this a little bit and I didn't answer you. Between radio and Lately, I owned a marketing agency.
Yeah.
And I built Walmart a spreadsheet system that did this, that got them 130% ROI year over year for 3 years.
That's quite a spreadsheet.
Because together we're stronger. Right? Yeah, it was.
Be better. Yeah.
It was. Yeah. And then I walked in there again. We have to wrap, but like I walked in there with all the rough edges that you're seeing now, and they looked at me like I was fucking crazy. They did, and I was. I mean, I was suggesting things that you would never suggest in a way that was totally offensive because I don't know, or at the time I didn't know the rules. I didn't know there's rules in corporate America. You don't reply all, number one.
Yeah, there are rules.
And I just didn't fit that mold. But the person who brought me in knew this and didn't care. Yeah, they trusted me. And that's the best lesson I've learned through all of this is that if you give people the permission to be themselves, they usually fly.
Yeah. Being in the people business, it's the hardest thing for some older school leaders and managers to do because they don't have a high level of trust. They're afraid if they let people loose, A, on their schedules, B, on their time, and C, on their creativity, they can't control them anymore. And they don't realize that every one of their employees is A, their best marketer, and B, their best salesperson, and C, their best client service person. Right? They're building their own brands, and if the brands are housed underneath a brand that people go, oh man, I'd like to work there because they're a bunch of really cool, creative people, right? That is hard for some people to make that shift, but that's where the magic happens. How many people on your team today? How big is Lately? 7
full-time and 5 part-time.
Where do you see the business going in 5 years? Interview question.
Right now, Lately does 75% of the work for you, and our goal is to have it do 90% of the work for you in the next year and a half, really. And we just built a self-service product. So what we're really working on is how do we give the power of an army to the armies of one, and do it in a way that uses that model I told you. It's working, by the way. We just released this a couple months ago, and the conversion rates are really high, and we're discovering that people are really interested in pushing the button to see what the AI happens, what it does, what it comes up with. So we're learning how to gamify that, and that is an interesting kind of understanding. And I don't have the answer, Pete, but I'll get it, because we're really good at this. But figuring out, like, what's the KPI for people? In marketers at a company, it's pretty easy usually. It's like, be more effective, right? Now for their boss, it could be save time or save money, but save time and money are not really hot buttons for people anymore. They could give a fuck. They assume it's part of the jam already, But even be more effective seems to not be ringing enough of a bell anymore, which is crazy. Like, what do you want? I've got Gary Vee. I'm getting him a 12,000% increase engagement, 12,000%. I've got a 98% sales conversion. I mean, Jesus Christ, what more could you want? But they do. So my challenge is discovering either A, how to communicate this better, give them more, or make the value so much more. The value is not obvious enough yet. That's what I've learned.
Oh, it's so painful when that's the case, because I'll tell you, I am now very curious about it lately, because I am a podcaster, I am a content creator. I'm not good at either one of them. But I'll tell you that the game changer for me was, and I will say for me, it was time. And time led to scale, which led to performance. Mm-hmm. So when I started my podcast, I was doing 2 episodes a week just to build content. I wanted to get it out there. I wanted to get into a rhythm. And I was running I was working full time, and it was exhausting. I'd spend 4 to 6 hours a weekend editing one podcast because I was stupidly very anal about it. And I realized I was editing myself out of almost every episode. Like, the conversation was good, but it wasn't necessary to pull out what you were saying. So I'd literally just, everywhere I could, just take Pete out, and get it down to the core essence. But I ended up giving it over to a company that does all my editing for me. And it is amazing how much productivity that saved me and time. Now I enjoy the podcast because I don't feel like, oh, God, I just created 10 hours of work over the weekend. But here's the thing that I hadn't contemplated. And by the way, they do create a snippet for me. They create 2 snippets for every episode. I have no idea how or why they choose them.
And why not more? That seems like
it's a complete waste. But again, it's for me. There is value because I know how much it costs for me to create a snippet. I know how much time it would be, because I did those myself as well. That's part of it. I would drop it into a subtitle. I'd do it. I'd fix all the errors. I'd edit that segment. Do it in Wondershare. All that shit. Right. I figured out how to do all that. Scale was such a challenge for me. And now I can focus on other parts of my business. So you're right. If I could get 15 snippets out of that, both in video and in copy, that I could blog or post, I'd even like to take a snippet that just had me in the shot, right? So what did I say in that episode versus the 2 of us together that I could do as a one-on-one thing? This is, you're at the forefront of this content generation. And I think people are afraid of, because by the way, it's a freaking lot of work. Creating content.
It's a huge amount of work.
It's a huge amount of work.
Good content.
Good content, and consistently, right? So you're solving those problems, and if you have results like a 12,000% increase in conversions or sales conversion, whatever it is, somebody's got to pay attention. I hope I don't think, I would say 5 years ago you went way ahead of the market. Now I think you've hit that wave at exactly the right time. We'll see how you catch the wave now.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Either people get it or they don't. And part of the getting it is the mindset. So this is where that long tail comes in, because everybody gets promote my podcast once or twice, where I'm going to give you 40, 50 snippets literally. And like not everybody does this, but my team uses all of them and plugs them out for weeks on end, because we've created this engine here where, so we have right now with the self-service product, we have 1,000 visits to the homepage every month. And through the homepage and then clicking to the sign up, this is the self-service version, we've got a 48% sales conversion.
Wow.
Okay, which is like really high. Now, it's 98 on the enterprise side, so that's with a human involved at the end of the process.
Right.
And then with the self-service, no human involved. And this was the test. Can it work this way? And the reason it works is because we bet on this residual, how long it takes for all 40, 50 posts to go out over time and then build up into a patchwork of a quilt in our calendar, right?
Yeah.
Over years of traffic. The conversation I had with my team yesterday is, okay, we've been going along like this with our no budget for marketing and our small team. How do we make it 2,000 visits a month with no money? What we're doing now.
And when you think about your team repurposing these snippets, these 40 snippets, have you automated that part of it? Like, so in other words, I've taken this podcast, I've generated these snippets, I push it out to the team. They just have to literally go copy, paste, push? Or how does it work?
Oh no, we push it out for them.
You're shitting me.
Yeah, we automated that too.
Damn.
Yeah. So I created an army of evangelists, right?
Oh, that's awesome.
Because what you said is exactly what I learned, which is when you make your employees your biggest fans, just like your customers, they market you for free. So when we talked about in the beginning, when I'm a shitty leader, the reason I feel so bad is because I'm hurting my most valuable assets.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And you described that right at the beginning. By the way, I've got 16 pages of notes.
I'm sorry.
No, by the way, I'm going to get all the transcripts of this, but there are some things I write down because usually it's funny. I write shit down, and I go back and go, that's the name of the pod. That's the name of this episode. So you said two things. I want you to share an example for me. So you know when you're taking the funny out of the room, and you could be soul crushing. How would you be soul crushing to your team? What would be an example of something you would do? You'd be like, God, I suck.
You know, I don't understand why people can't read my mind. I really don't. I get really upset about that. And I surround myself with people who mostly can. I'm really lucky. I have superior teammates. They are incredible humans. And I would die if I lost them because this is how good they are. So in those rare occasions where they can't read my mind, I throw a fit like an asshole. And the reason is because I'm so used to us operating at this high level, and I don't understand what happened. Why did they drop off?
Right.
So that's my fault. That's my expectations are too high. Nobody can be inhuman. Only I can be inhuman. And I have those same expectations of myself. You know what that's like, Pete. When you're always going 100 miles an hour when the engine is only meant to go 25. There's going to be
parts start to fall off. Yeah.
They do. Yeah. And it's not just for me, it's for them and as well. And if it's my job to cheerlead them, it's difficult. Like, I surround myself with people who are much better at cheerleading than me because it sounds like bullshit when it comes from me, honestly. Because it is bullshit because I don't it's not my forte. It's so bizarre. Like, I like to pay people and let the money talk, but at the same time I don't pay them often because I can't. So it's like, fuck.
Sure.
Those
are always great conversations.
The worst. And it gets harder and harder as we get older because, as just as human beings, we have our capacity to withstand duress is harder. It's ridiculous. Like, this is what I was writing about on LinkedIn yesterday. Like, the constant eating of the glass and the constant getting punched in the face. Like, I have a really high tolerance for pain personally, really high. And it's not a badge of honor. It just is my way, And not everybody has that tolerance. And obviously I have an addiction also, Pete, because I keep going back for more and more. What the fuck? I can't even imagine life after lately.
Right.
You had asked about, stealing the funny out of the room. My other great gift is to see the glass half empty. I have a note right here. It says positive, because this is my Achilles heel. I'm always negative. My husband is a fucking saint because I'm always pointing out what's wrong with everything.
Which is an unusual dominating trait for an entrepreneur.
The good news is I'm always looking for the problems and I'm trying to fix them. That's my because that's what you want. You're always trying to the moment that there's no problems, and this happened to us, like, oh boy, I remember this blissful time where we thought we were like coasting on whipped cream and jujubes, and then I realized what the fuck was really going on, and it was terrible. But my team is very bubbly. They're all hilarious. They have great senses of humor. All of them take criticism very well. I'm terrible at that also. And they know the power they have because I talk about it all the time. And I don't tell them enough personally, but I say it on these things, and I think publicly is a better way to do it anyway, so I hope so. And I know that they occasionally listen to these things, or at least the ones who have to go through the AI do.
Yeah,
But
very astute of you.
I pray to God I just want to say, I pray to God every day to be better, Pete, don't you?
A lot. It's the first thing I say every morning is, please help me just be a little better than yesterday. And it's funny, whether it's with my wife or my team, I know when I've been shitty. And usually it's pretty instant, and I go, shit. This morning you said you wouldn't do that, and then you just freaking did it. So it's great that you're, oddly enough, the chief operating officer at Sabo, who I've grown to really admire and like as a person, is there's a disaster around every corner. And that's the way he sees the world. He lives his entire life is in spreadsheets. His calendar, his to-do list, I think his Christmas list, I think he writes his wife love letters in Excel spreadsheets, right? Honey, just hit the macro. It'll tell you everything I feel about you. But
column A, row 6.
Exactly. But the good thing is we've recognized that's how we work well together. Because I'm gonna lean forward and pull him along and say, Chris, it's gonna be okay. We've got to go do this. Let's break some glass. It's gonna be, we're gonna jump off a cliff here. And he's like, Pete, yeah, great. Did you look at this? And if I haven't looked at it, I need to. Sometimes it'll pull me back to the cliff. Other times, like, yeah, fuck it, we're still going, right? And I haven't had a situation where I've been working with that kind of really good balance. So, and he's really good at taking feedback. He's good at giving me feedback. So it's worked. It's pleasant. And we have a co-founder who is our mad scientist who, has all the passion and fire and verve. And I think sometimes he's like, would you two just frickin' figure it out? So we've got a tiebreaker if we need one, which is awesome.
That's
all
excellent.
Right, Kate,
yeah,
so
teamwork is magical.
It is. And, so what's next for you and your musician husband, David? I mean, you guys are, what's the biggest thing you're looking forward to doing this summer? I know you got back from 2 West Coast trips, so maybe not that. But what are you looking to bring home, and maybe a music festival or something? What's your highlight?
I don't know, Pete, because of COVID is so weird. But my parents live on a lake in Vermont, and my favorite thing is to swim in that lake, or to float in it at least. So I really hope to do that, and I miss my niece and nephew who will be there. There's a photo from a couple summers ago of me doing some chalk artwork with them, and we're all lying down on the chalk artwork, and they're smiling, and I'm smiling. And for my birthday, David likes to take photos and put them in a card and print them out for me. Photos he thinks I like. And so that photo is hanging in my room there. And he chose that because he knew that I missed them, and because they give me joy. I don't have my own kids.
How old are they?
So they're 6 and 9.
Great ages. And they think Aunt Kate is like the bomb, don't they?
They like me. It takes them a little while to warm up every time, but then we become friends again, and they call me Monty Cake.
Nice. That's pretty cool. That's a good thing to be associated with.
Yeah. I have to pee, Pete.
By the way, we came back to urinating.
And Lauren is texting me wondering if I'm coming to this meeting.
So let's let you go.
Like,
I'll end this. We'll close real quick. But Kate, I could do this for 2 more hours. You got a job to do, and you got to go pee.
I love you.
Love it. It's been great.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well done. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for checking out Eating Crow. Like and subscribe so you never miss a video.